and hope that that is going to not blow up. Darren, can you keep an eye on Facebook as we go through this evening?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
So for questions, you mean? Yeah, that's just the usual.
Yeah.
Handsome person, David Pollard, pops up.
Okay.
Yeah, he answers a lot of questions. He's very active.
Good evening, everybody. I have opened the meeting up now to all attendees. I'm going to disable the waiting room so I don't have to keep worrying about other people. But we are pretty much ready to go. So I might just kick off and welcome you all to the November meeting of the Gungahlin Community Council and this year of many exciting things, 2020. We have a really strong agenda tonight on a range of issues that I think are pretty topical and pretty interesting. So I hope all of you enjoy what we've got this evening. Just a reminder to all of our speakers and all of our attendees, we are on Zoom for most of the active speakers and some of the participants, and the whole event is then streamed onto Facebook Live. We'll be taking questions at the end of each speaker's presentation via chat or raising a hand in Zoom, or if on Facebook Live, just give a Facebook comment and one of the other members of the GCC executive will relay that through. So joining me from the executive are Kevin Cox, Prasad Tipineri, Henley Samuel, and I think that's all, and Darren Marks. So we've got a good representation of the executive here. So without further ado, I might just go to item 1 on the agenda, which is to cover off a number of updates through the month, but also to introduce you to the agenda. So after I've spoken about some of the things going on, we've got Rowan Spence from the ACT Electoral Commission. Rowan spoke to us way back in 2016, but has generously agreed to come back and talk a little bit about what happened in 2020 and how the election went, and particularly how Yerrabee unfolded from an electoral point of view. Then Andrew Griffith, who looks after all things Gungahlin for the Suburban Land Agency, will talk a little bit about the Gungahlin land release and other projects they have underway through the 2020-21 period. There was an article posted on our website about this, and Andrew's speaking to that and providing some more background and detail. And then finally, the team from Pod Projects, led by, I think, Terry Shaw, will talk about their proposals and their thinking for a site in the town centre, Block 3, Section 229. So without further ado, I'll move on to a bit of a wrap up. Look, I'll talk very briefly about the election because we do have Rowan talking a little later on about all this. Just as a reminder, we went into the ACT election with 3 Labor Party members of the Legislative Assembly and 2 Liberal members of the Legislative Assembly in the seat of Yerrabee, the electorate of Yerrabee. And after the electoral process, we've had Alistair Coe re-elected, Michael Pedersen from the Labor Party re-elected, Suzanne Elfman, the Labor Party re-elected, but a new candidate elected for the Liberal Party in the seat of Yerrabee, Leanne Castley, and a new development in the Yerrabee political scene. We now have a Greens candidate successfully elected as a member of the Legislative Assembly, and we welcome Andrew Braddock into the seat of Yerrabee. Andrew, of course, has previously served time with us on the Gungahlin Community Council. So some quite significant results, and I'm really looking forward to what Rowan's got to say about how the numbers went. And I'd like to congratulate all those elected and re-elected members of the Legislative Assembly, and we look forward to working with them to deliver the best possible outcomes we can for the coming new government. Now, just talking about the new government, I know all of you are very keen planning nerds and everyone's very interested in all things political. Well, maybe not, but one of the more interesting documents that's come out was the agreement between the Labor Party and the Greens that forms the basis of their their joint government. And the document's in 3 sections. And what I've done is I've gone through and just pulled out the things that obviously refer to specifically to Gungahlin, just so you can see them. There are things that are joint, that is supported by both the Greens and Labor, and things that are Labor initiatives that the government will progress, and Greens initiatives that the government will progress. So I've just quickly pulled these out to give you some idea of some of the thinking. So the only joint initiative is to construct a build-to-rent affordable rental co-located with Common Ground in Gungahlin, which is terrific. Common Ground's been very successful. And I've been putting this text in blue, which is important, but it's not a Gungahlin specific thing, because it says the government's going to progress the current planning review, the review of the territory planning system, and also to implement the Standing Committee on Planning and Urban Renewal's inquiry on development applications. So a focus on a whole bunch of things in the planning environment, including the 2 I mentioned, and the territory planning system review, working towards 30% urban tree canopy, and I think that would be welcome here in Gungahlin, where we suffer some of the worst heat island effects of any parts of Canberra. And also this proposal to have an independent planning advisory service for residents impacted by planning decisions and DAs. So all of that seems to be positive based on the sort of feedback we get from residents. In the agreement, there are a bunch of things, commitments from the Labor Party, including rolling out a new Wellcome Health Centre in northern Gungahlin between 2021 and the middle of the decade, so over the next term of government. In addition to the high schools committed in Taylor and Kenny, a new primary school will be built in North Gungahlin. I'm sure a lot of you will have seen the commitments during the election to building a Gungahlin tennis centre, so that will be funded and commenced to be located, at least based on the plans I last saw, between Moncrief and Amaroo. And then perhaps most significantly, because we're very under-resourced for community facilities, building in new community centres, not only here in Gungahlin, but also in Woden, as well as a large multicultural event venue at Epic for cultural performances available for large functions. And this is something that's been frequently requested by a number of the communities here in Gungahlin. So they're the things that are in the agreement that were Labor initiated. And then under the heading of Greens with the words Gungahlin, there were, again, building a new multi-purpose centre in the Gungahlin Town Centre, revitalising Yirribee Pond and Foreshore, which I know a lot of people have mentioned, and committing to releasing concessional sites to community groups over the next 4 years, term of government, with at least 2 of those in Gungahlin. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And finally, a commitment to try and expand the CIT campus here in Gungahlin, which I think would be welcome. So that gives you a sort of a tips of the iceberg view of quite a large document with a very specific focus on those things that are in Gungahlin. And as I mentioned, more on Yirribee and all things election shortly. In terms of the other things we've been involved in, we did a bit of work prior to the election, documenting on a 1-pager what we expected of candidates, and we'll be following up with the elected MLAs around, well, this is what we kind of hope for. Let's talk about how you might deliver that. But we've had a bit of trouble engaging with other parts of government through that period because, of course, the government itself is in caretaker mode. So it was a bit hard to get too much involvement with government engagement with agencies. But having said that, we did have a couple of meetings that led to some of the articles we've published online. One of the more interesting developments was that in early September, the federal government announced that they were going to spend $3.5 billion to essentially upgrade the NBN, but particularly to take fibre deeper into neighbourhoods serviced by fibre to the node. Now, Canberra overall is actually more impacted by this than any other capital city in Australia. Over 70% of the NBN in Canberra is built using fibre to the node. But here in Gungahlin, we're generally pretty well off, except for, because we have fibre to the premise, except for Casey Stage 1 and the Village of Hall, which are also fibre to the node currently. So we've written a letter to the NBN encouraging them to look at addressing those gaps in the NBN footprint map. And to also promote all region districts where there NBN's enterprise or business grade services are available. Just to show what this looks like graphically, I'm sorry, it may be a little bit fuzzy, but what you see, anything that's purple is a location serviced by fibre to the premise or fibre to the home. And the yellow bits are areas serviced with fibre to the node technology, which reuses some of the old copper wires. And you'll see that there was a portion of Casey that was left out, and the village of Hall that's impacted in the Gungahlin district, and we're sort of seeking to address that anomaly. But you also see that you see this ocean of yellow in Belconnen, which is characteristic of almost all of Canberra. So that's one of our activities we've been involved in. We've had further discussions with the Gungahlin police station commander about some of the issues that have been raised by residents, people racing, hooning in cars. You know, how do we address some of the challenges with parking and traffic flow and a few of those sort of issues, but basically getting a working dialogue running between the policing group out here, and also working with the MLAs I just mentioned to progress the need to upgrade the Gungahlin police station to make it fit for purpose, consistent with the size of Gungahlin and the challenges we have out here. Internally, we've begun a refresh of the Gungahlin Community Council constitution. It's extremely old. We're looking to simplify it, clarify it, modernise it, and get some level of consistency with the other community councils in Canberra. So we've begun that work. But as part of that, what we've started to do is put in place some of the processes that we've perhaps not had to the forefront of what some things we really should have done a long time ago, but haven't got around to. So what we're now doing, asking residents to do, is consistent with every other community council in Canberra, ask residents to actually join up to the GCC so we can build a member register, which is generally a requirement of a registered association like the Gungahlin Community Council. It's free, so no cost involved, and it can be done online. There's a very simple online form which you can access through that link, or by going to the Gungahlin Community Council website and clicking on About, and then how do I join the GCC? If you haven't got access to the web, there's a downloadable form, so you can download a form, print it off, fill it in, and either post it to us or just deliver it to us at a meeting. So that's one of the things we've been working on internally to get ourselves a little more organised. The other and the final thing I'd like to flag is that our annual general meeting will be on next month in December, along with our normal public meeting in December. It's really, really, really important that you pay attention to two things. The first is it's in person. So this will be our last, hopefully our last, unless something changes, all digital Gungahlin Community Council meeting. So we're going to be back in person at the Gungahlin Club, like we've always been. But of course, it'll have to be done COVID safe, and we're going to have 38 people in the room. So we must register to attend that event. So people have to book a seat to attend. Again, it's free. We just need to have some way of recording who's attending. And the link for the annual general meeting, which is on the next PowerPoint slide, makes it obvious where you do that. So it's very important that if you're going to attend, you register. And the second thing is, if you have been assuming it'll be on the second Wednesday of the month, it's not. It's on the first Wednesday of the month because we couldn't book the room. So we're on the first Wednesday of the month of December for our AGM and public meeting. And of course, if you want to nominate for the Gungahlin Community Council Executive or vote, if we have to have vote an election for positions, you have to be a registered member. So go and register. It'll only take a few seconds, I can guarantee that. So quick wrap up before we move on to our first speaker. Don't forget to sign up as a GCC member. If you're interested in joining the GCC executive, you'll need to nominate, and that's available from that link, which will be live after this meeting. And if you want to attend the meeting in person, the AGM and December public meeting on the 2nd, you need to go to that same link, and there's a big button saying book here, which is to book a ticket for that event. If you do book a ticket and you then subsequently decide you can't attend in person, then please return the ticket, and there's a mechanism to do that that's built into the system. All right, now I'll pause briefly in case there are any questions from anybody on that topic. Any questions? Any hands raised? Anything in the chat window? Nope. Okay. Well, I can see that Rose Spence from the ACT Electoral Commission is online and hopefully ready to go. Are you there, Ryan?
I am here. Can you hear me?
I not only can hear you, I can see you.
Excellent.
Which is excellent. Ro, as I mentioned before, was speaking to us, seems like 1,000 years ago. It was only 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
And is back to give us a little bit of an insight on how the election played out here in the city, or how the election played out, full stop, with a little bit of detail on what happened in Yerrabi. Over to you, Rowan.
All right, I'm going to try and share my screen so you can see my PowerPoint presentation. Let me know if that's not working. Has that worked?
Not for me.
Oh no, hang on, I need to hit the share button.
There you go. Rose Spence has started screen sharing. Yep, that looks excellent.
Great, okay. So hello everyone, my name is Rose Spence. I'm the ACT Deputy Electoral Commissioner. I've been with the Electoral Commission for nearly 22 years now, so several elections under my belt. What I'm going to be talking about today is how the Hare-Clark system works in the ACT, because Tasmania also shares the Hare-Clark electoral system with us. So I'll go through a little bit of a preamble about Hare-Clark, but then I'm going to jump into a demonstration and an explanation of how it works using coloured champagne glasses to really show you how votes jump from one candidate to another and end up with electing particular candidates. Hopefully that'll give you a graphical representation of how members are elected to the Legislative Assembly. And then I'm going to try and bring up the scrutiny sheets for Yerrabi. And once you've got that background information on how Hare-Clark works, I'll show you how that worked, particularly in the electorate of Yerrabi. And I've also been asked to just talk about some polling place level results. So I'll jump over to our election results webpage and you can see some of those Yerrabi-based polling places. And I don't think that'll take particularly long. It's probably something you can personally spend some time looking at rather than going into depth today. But anyway, let's crack into it. It's been a while since I've given this presentation. COVID has not allowed for this kind of thing too often, so bear with me if it's not as smooth as it should hope to be. Yeah, there we go. So what is Hare-Clark? Hare-Clark is it's one of the family of electoral systems called single transferable vote, or STV, and really that's just a really psephologist way of saying preferential voting. So you have a vote, and that particular vote is transferable across candidates. So that election that's forefront in most people's minds right now, the American election, they use first past the post, and that is not a single transferable vote system. That is literally you vote for one candidate and that vote stays there. But in Australia, we use essentially across the board, across all jurisdictions, we use an STV system where your vote doesn't just stop with a candidate depending on how they're progressing in the count. It gets transferred depending on how that count is progressing. But it is also a version of a category of electoral systems called a quota preferential method of proportional representation. So candidates are elected from a multi-member constituency in the ACT. So we elect 25 members, 5 for each electorate. We did have 7-seat Molonglo for many years, but that's gone into the history books. And candidates are elected by achieving a quota of votes. So that's where the quota preferential comes from. many European countries have a proportional representation system where votes are really aimed at a proportional electing members of parliament that represents the parties in the same proportion as the votes that they were received. But in Australia, we use a quota preferential. So we use preferential voting, and in order to be elected, you need to reach a quota of votes. So a specific number of votes to be elected. And those votes can be made up by votes cast for that particular candidate, and we call those first preference votes, or they can be votes transferred to the candidate via preferences, and therefore the preferential side of the quota preferential. The Senate ballot paper or Senate electoral system is also a quota preferential system, and in fact, Hare Clark and the Senate system share some significant similarities. There are really only minor differences between how a Senate style system works and how we run things in the ACT and Hare Clark. The real difference being that a Senate system, some could argue, favours the parties, while Hare Clark gives really much greater weight to candidates. There's obviously no ticket voting, no above the line voting in a Hare Clark election where there is in the Senate. And so it's really, Hare Clark is really aimed to the elector to make those choices of candidate amongst themselves, where something like the Senate, where the party gets to decide the order of the candidates and gets to submit a ticket. We don't have that in the ACT and Hare Clark. And you can see how this plays out in the proliferation of everyone's favourite corflutes across the ACT, because in the Senate, where the vast majority of people vote in a ticket system and a one above the line runs the way the party chose, without that ticket voting, it's really based on the candidate. And so candidates are not only fighting against competitor political parties, they're also actually fighting against candidates within their own party. And they've really got to appeal to electors on the basis of a candidate and what they are going to offer the electorate. And they can't sit back and rest on the I guess the laurels of the political party as the ticket. And then in the ACT, the distribution of how to vote cards, not only is it prohibited within 100 metres of a polling place, but when you also match that up with Robson rotation, where candidates are rotated in a different order within the column, that also gives greater weight to that individual candidate rather than the party. And that's really at the heart of the ACT's electoral system. Now, you know, some people don't necessarily find that to be beneficial, but it really is at the heart of an ACT electoral system. Those three, the prohibition, Robson rotation, and the no ticket voting is really at the heart of what Hare Clark means in the ACT. So when we talk about a quota is the minimum number of votes a candidate needs to be elected in that election. And it's determined by a particular formula, and that formula is the number of formal votes, and that's divided by the number of vacancies. So all 5 electorates in the ACT are electing 5 members. So all 5 electorates are, it's the number of formal votes divided by 5 plus 1, so divided by 6, and then you add 1 to that. So it's essentially a 6th plus 1 of the number of formal votes in order to be elected. In percentage terms, that's 16.66666 repeater, or 67. And that's the number of votes you need to be elected. And like I said earlier, you can get those votes via first preferences or via preferences from other excluded or elected candidates. We'll go into that. We'll go into that now. So the example I'm going to give now, we're just going to be electing 3 MLAs. And so the quota would be 1/4 plus 1, using that quota, using that formula I just mentioned then. And we're just going to have to be a little bit creative in our thinking here. We're going to be using each vote that an elector is submitting here is a drop of champagne going into a champagne glass. You have to imagine that the drop is coloured, and also that it has numbers written on it, and also that it can be cut up into smaller pieces, that single drop. And that's essentially the single transferable vote part of this system. And we've got to imagine that each of the drops adds up to just under 4 glasses, because with a quota system with 5 electorates, if you're getting 1/6 plus 1, that means 5 people can get 1/6 plus 1 of the vote, but 6 cannot. So in the same way here, we're electing 3. That means that there will be 3 full glasses and 1 glass that's not quite full, and that's essentially how you'll see this play out. And the first 3 candidates with full glasses in this example will win. So how Clark works, you either get to exclude candidates who have the lowest chance of progressing, so essentially the candidate with the least votes at that point in time, or you're electing candidates, and the vast majority of time when you're electing a candidate, they've got more than the quota. It is entirely possible to get exactly quota, but extremely unlikely. So most times someone gets elected, they're going over the quota, and in this sense, it's where the glass overflows. And so those extra votes have to be passed on to other candidates, and we'll see this in action now, but that's essentially, again, that single transferable vote. Your vote doesn't stop. It keeps going to help get other candidates elected. And that's why we, while the ballot paper says mark your ballot paper 1 to 5, and you may then number as many candidates as you wish from 6 onwards, we as an electoral commission always recommend numbering every single box on that ballot paper. And that's because if you don't, then your vote stops, and it stops at helping other candidates get elected over ones that you prefer less than. So I've always said it's just as important to number the candidate you like least as it is the candidate you like the most. So number every box. It's really important. Otherwise, your vote exhausts, and it can take no further part in the election. People often say, "Well, I don't want to help these candidates get elected," but what you're doing is helping a candidate you might dislike compared to a candidate you really, really don't want elected. So yes, whilst you might not be wanting to put a candidate preference in every candidate box, it is really quite important. Otherwise, you're leaving it up to other electors. All right. So here's what we're seeing with this particular example. We're seeing a quota. There's 24,000 votes in this election. We're electing 3, so the quota is 6,001. So that's 24,000 divided by 4, which is 3 plus 1, 6,001. And what we see here is that candidate blue has way over quota. Quota is 6,001, candidate blue has 10,000 votes. This is a fairly common occurrence when you talk about, generally speaking, this is often the leader of a political party. And we saw in the last election, that the one that's just completed, Andrew Barr reached quota on first preferences. And so this is a fairly typical example of that kind of occurrence. Then we see candidate red, who in this example is a member of the same political party as blue. We have a couple of other candidates in yellow, pink and lime. And then we have a candidate that's green. And in this example, green is typically just as an example, where, you know, this isn't obviously always the case, but we use it here to show the benefit of preferences, and this is typically something like maybe a single issue candidate who has a particular following within the community, and so can get quite a decent number of first preference votes, and we'll see how that progresses as this count goes on. But what we do here is there's two choices, well, two paths in a count. The first is anyone elected? Does anyone have quota? And if they do they have a surplus? And if no one has quota, then you exclude the elector with the least number of votes. So here clearly on first preferences, blue has reached quota. So what we need to do is blue doesn't need 10,000 votes. Blue needs 6,001 votes. So what they used to do way back in an old style Senate count, they don't do this anymore, but this is what they used to do. And in fact, Hare, out of Hare Clark, when he devised this kind of voting system, did it in this way as well. If you don't need 3,999 of the votes, what they used to do was take 3,999 random ballot papers from that 10,000 and distribute those, looking at the 2s and the 3s and the further preferences. Now, because you've got to leave a candidate at quota, that you've got to leave blue at 6,001. But if you take a random sample of ballot papers and distribute them, not only is that not representative necessarily of everyone who voted for blue, you're just taking a random sample, and those preferences can be, you know, it's only representative of those 3,999 people. But if you were to need to do a recount in that election, you're almost guaranteed, or you are guaranteed, to take a different 3,999. So you get a different result. So we don't do that anymore. What we do is we take the entire, in the ACT, we take the entire last parcel, so the last batch of ballot papers that got distributed to that candidate to get them over the quota, and we redistribute all of those ballot papers, but at a reduced value. We call that the surplus, the transfer value. And essentially that transfer value is the number of votes you don't need, so in this case 3,999, divided by the number of continuing ballot papers. So in this case, assuming none of them exhaust, it would be divided by 10,000. So essentially, what we're saying here is that we're taking all of the drops of champagne and we're cutting each of them into 0.6 and 0.4. We're leaving 0.6 with the elected candidate, and all of those ballot papers, 0.4 of them, are getting distributed according to where that number 2 vote is. And if you see that here, they get distributed here. Red gets 2,399 of them, and lime gets 1,599. What this example is just trying to show is that often you'll get one candidate in a party who gets a lot of first preference votes, and some of the other candidates in that party do not receive all that many first preference votes, because candidates have only got one first preference to give. And so if they give it to that, let's say, party leader, they can't give it to the other candidates within that party, or any other candidate. But when you distribute that surplus, all of a sudden, a lot of them often flow within the party. And we're seeing that in this example, right? So red is getting quite a lot. And whilst they started quite low, and often on first preference, you can go, well, that candidate didn't get many votes, they mustn't be very popular. But because an elector only gets that one first preference, they can't give it to more than that. They're giving it to the one, let's say the party leader, and that's stopping it getting to those other candidates. But then when that candidate gets elected, it starts flowing. And so it's not necessarily a reflection of that they're not popular. It's just that there is a candidate who's more popular than they are. And so that's what we're seeing here. But in this example, we've now distributed the surplus of the successful candidate, and now blue doesn't need any more votes. So any preference that has blue 2, 3, 4, or 5, you just skip it because blue is elected, and you treat it like they don't exist anymore. But we've distributed that surplus, we've got one elected, but now there's no other surplus to distribute. So the next step is to exclude the candidate with the least chance of being elected. In this example, Pink has 2,750 votes. And so because they're all first preference votes, they're not at a reduced value. They're all worth one vote. So they're quite juicy votes to be getting. And in this example, if we move on, we can see that Pink is now excluded and has 0 votes. But red, yellow, and lime are progressing closer and closer to that quota line. What we're showing here is that green, although green started with quite a lot of first preference votes, being a single issue or a particular interest group candidate, they're not getting the preferences in order to creep them closer and closer to getting elected. So we've now we've eliminated the first candidate, but we haven't got anyone else elected at this point. So we still need to exclude the candidate with the least number of votes. But what we've got now, that candidate appears to be Lime, but Lime has now received votes that are 1 Lime. They've received votes that are 1 blue, 2 Lime, and they've received votes that are 1 pink, 2 lime. And the 1 pink, 2 lime and the 1 lime are all worth the same value. They're worth 1 vote. It's only the ones that came from blue that are at a fractional transfer value. And when they've got votes that are worth the same amount, you can transfer them all at the same time. And so that's what we'll do now. So what you'll see now is that lime will lose the votes that are lime coloured and pink coloured, and they will, and this is just a single, essentially on our scrutiny sheet, it's just a 1-line count, and they get transferred. And that'll leave lime still with the transfer value votes they receive from blue, and that'll be the next count. It's just that they're worth a different value and you can't transfer them all at the same time. So we'll see that now. Lime just has the green, the blue votes left. So we haven't finished excluding lime yet, but we can see that red, having received some of those first preference votes, full value votes at a combination of pink and green, has got over the quota. So in this example, red didn't start with many first preference votes, but because they're receiving preferences from other candidates, they get closer and closer, and eventually they get elected. Now, red has reached surplus, so they're elected. That means they can't get any more votes. And in fact, they've got more votes than they need. But we can't transfer those surplus votes until we've finished excluding lime. Now, lime has a chunk of votes at a transfer value received from blue, but there's potentially the chance that they go 1 blue, 2 lime, 3 red, but red's elected, so red doesn't want them. In fact, red can't have them. So if there is a 3 red, you skip it and you look at where the 4 is. So if it goes 1 blue, 2 lime, 3 red, 4 yellow, or 4 green, that's where it'll end up. And it retains the value that it got as a transfer value. It retains the value that lime got them at. So it's not a full value. It's at that 3,999 divided by 10,000, whatever value that is. What you're seeing now is a fairly common occurrence where towards the end of the counts, there's only 2 electors, let's say 2 candidates left in the count, and at this point you'll often see votes exhaust, and this is because electors haven't preferenced yellow or green, And so if they haven't preferenced yellow or green, their vote just exhausts, and it can go no further. This is where I say, this is why it's important to number every vote, every box, because if you're one of those electors who has left green or yellow off, then you're having no say at all in whether yellow gets elected or green gets elected. And whilst you might not like either of them, I'm fairly confident you're going to prefer one of them over the other. So it's really important that you do say, well, I prefer green over yellow, so I'll number that box, because you're still having your vote have a say. And you'll see now that green does start to get some votes, because some people do number every box. And if they've numbered every box, green's destined to get some of those preferences in this example. And so that's exactly what happens. Lime is now completely exhausted, and green got some votes and is getting very, very close to quota, and yellow is also getting quite close. But now, of course, we've excluded lime, but red got elected in that exclusion. So now we have to distribute red's surplus, and they also get transfer value of their own, new transfer value. In the ACT, we use a system called last parcel. Some systems would take every single vote that's in that red glass, and they would attribute a new transfer value to every one of those votes. I think WA Upper House does this. Now, I don't think that's a particularly great way of doing it, because it's making some votes worth more than they should be, and it's making some votes worth less than it should be. You could potentially take all of the, you could potentially run a new transfer value against each of those different values and come up with its own transfer value, but that gets really quite complicated. But with computers, you certainly couldn't, well, I mean, you probably could hand count like that, but I certainly couldn't, because my maths is atrocious. But you could potentially do it with computers. That would make things easier. But in the ACT, we don't. The ACT system was designed before computers and electronic counting. So what it does is takes the last parcel. And the last parcel that got red elected is Lime's votes. And so it's the same thing. How many votes does Lime have greater than the surplus? In this, it's 398 in this example. And then you would divide that by how many of those have a continuing candidate on them. So noting here that you would have exhausted votes, so some of them won't go anywhere. So you've got to work out how many have a preference against yellow or green, and so it would be 398 divided by how many can go to yellow or green would be the transfer value. That's getting a bit complicated, but anyway, we'll see that in action. And whilst both candidates received some votes from that, which was to be expected, yellow gets elected, and you can have 3 full glasses, but you can't have 4 full glasses. It's not possible. It is possible under Herr Clark that you don't have 3 full glasses, that the last candidate doesn't reach quota. Possible. It's fairly rare. Generally speaking, in the ACT, all elected candidates do end up reaching quota. To not reach quota, you've got to have quite a significant number of votes with the forced, and don't go to a continuing candidate.
Rowan, how are you travelling for time? Another 5 minutes?
That's the end of explaining that. I'm going to then move on to Yerraby. Are you happy to do that?
Yep, please.
So hopefully this works. So Yerraby table 2. I've got to work out how to change the screen I'm sharing. How do I do that? Share screen.
Yep, you're all over it. It looks like you know what you're doing.
If only that were true. Right, so can everyone see that scrutiny sheet now?
No. I can see shapes and columns, but
What does that mean? You can't
I
see.
can't read the text on the words.
Oh, no, but you can see the. Getting to see it now?
Yeah, barely.
Okay. Okay. Well, in Yerrabee, no one reached first quota. No one got the quota on first preferences. The quota was 8,910. And so, can you see it just at all?
I can see it, but obviously I'm only seeing a portion of a very large spreadsheet.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So no one got quota on first preferences. The quota was 8,910, and the highest was what do we see here? There's a 4,600 by Leanne Castley, 5,000 from Michael Pedersen. Where's
Alistair?
Alistair, where is he? There he is. Alistair got 8,685. So he's quite close, but not there. So the first step in this count was to exclude the candidate who got the least number of votes. And in this case, it was Mohammed Munir Hussain, who got 116 votes. Those 116 votes then get, you look at where the second preference is, and they got distributed across the board. So Fuxin Lee got 8, Helen Cross got 13 of those, Michael Pedersen got 5, if we can see that it's this line here. And so across the board, those 116 got transferred at full value. And then if we look at Alistair Coe, he got 6 of them. It crept him a little bit closer, but he's still not quite at quota. But the next step, of course, is to exclude the next candidate, which is Helen Cross. Helen Cross got 199 votes of first preferences, but 13 votes from Mohammed Munir Hussain. So Helen Cross had 212 votes to distribute because they're worth the same thing. And so you can distribute them all in one go. And that's exactly what happened here. Those 212 votes got distributed. That happened, and we just kept going and going, excluding the candidate with the least number of votes. So Bernie Brennan, then Mike Stelzig, all the way down to the point where Bethany Williams from the Canberra Progressives got excluded. And we'll move over to where that is. So just down here, this is Bethany Williams getting excluded, and those 1,634 votes get distributed across the board to where the preferences of each candidate, each elector says on their own personal ballot paper where that goes. And it can't go to any candidate that's been excluded. So if it was 1, Bethany Williams, 2, Mohammed Hussain, then it misses that and it goes to the 3, which might have been, let's say, Leanne Castley. So here we see that Bethany Williams gets excluded. Alistair Coe gets 46 of those votes. He was on 8,878. That takes him to 8,924, which is 14 votes over the quota. So at that particular point, Alistair Coe gets elected. He doesn't need 14 of those votes, so that's the surplus. So those 14 votes need to be passed on to another elector. I'm just going to try and go to. So scrutiny sheets have two sheets. Table 1, which is ballot papers. Table 2, which we're looking at here with all the lots of zeros, is the actual votes.
Andrew, if you can sort of close in the next 3 or 4 minutes, that would be great.
Yeah, no problem. I won't get to the polling place by polling place.
Oh, that sounds pretty interesting. But yeah, we're just conscious we're sort of
yeah, that's fine.
The hour.
Okay, so here's your 14 votes. This is the transfer value. So here's the 14 votes. There were 46 papers that were coming across, but 39 of them had candidates continuing candidates to go to. There were 7 that exhausted, you can see here. So that means the transfer value of Alastair Coe's votes are 14 divided by 39. That's the value that those votes got transferred at. And so you can see when they went across that Andrew Braddock, I'm assuming here he got one of those votes. Let's go back and have a look. Where is the Greens? Andrew, yeah, here we go. Andrew Braddock got one of those papers. And at a transfer value, when you times that one paper by 14 divided by 39, you get 0.358974. And that adds to his total. So he went from 4,332 to 4,332.3589. And you keep going like that. And this just kept going like that so the next stage was, okay, well, no one's reached quota. We keep excluding candidates who have the least number of votes until you got to the point where Michael Pedersen reached quota. In the same count, because Deepak Raj Gupta was the person being excluded, you can see that the Labor Party received the majority of Deepak Raj Gupta's preferences. Where is he? Here, he went out here. He lost, so all 6,000 votes go across. 2,000 of them and another 2,000 went to Michael Pedersen and Susan Orr, and that got them over the line. And so hopefully that just shows you, I'll wrap up now, but that shows you what we've just been talking about with the champagne glasses in a real life Yerrabi example. Do you want to ask questions or no time?
We're very tight for time. If you can throw up if you have some easily consumable summary of distribution of polling booths, that'd be great.
Look, I don't. You can go on to there's nothing much to show there. Okay. You can just go to each of the Yerrabi main polling places, and you can see where those votes were. It's only first preferences that it shows.
Okay, well, we'll do that. Okay, well, Ro, I must say I did enjoy looking at sheet 2 post-election to see how it grew. Is there anyone who's got a question that they want to pose? I mean, other than, golly gee, how am I going to remember this for 4 years from now? Henley.
Yeah, that's all you got to remember.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's very useful and helpful, and running out of time, it's painful as well. But what I'm thinking, maybe we can have question and answer sessions, maybe in future, if you're available, we can do it. Maybe just before the election time and stuff, or maybe next year, where we can go through it, and then we can put you in a big slot.
I'd also be happy just to, if you want to email me at rowan.spence@act.gov.au with any questions about that, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks, Hanley, and thanks, Ryan, because it's elections can be pretty intense processes. So I'm glad that you're through it safely, and we're not dealing with any of the dramas that we're watching the Americans go through. So thank you for making the time.
You're welcome.
All right. So we're moving on to the equally exciting topic of land release projects and planning in Gungahlin. And we're very fortunate to have with us Andrew Griffiths from the Suburban Land Agency. Andrew, are you ready to roll?
I am indeed. Can you hear me?
Well, I can hear you and I can see you with the most spectacular background.
Hopefully it's not backwards. I haven't used Zoom before and the rotation was...
No, I can read the words.
Excellent. So I'll just try to share my screen as well. Hopefully we don't have any dramas with this.
And the computer says...
Second.
We're sharing screen. Excellent. Looks good.
So just like to start off with the acknowledgement of country. So we can acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the land and waters where we live and work, and pay our respects to the elders past, present and future. We do appreciate the time to be here. Again, it's always good to be able to talk to the Community Council, and we do get good value out of the feedback that comes from these sessions. As Peter alluded to, there is a good background document on the agenda item that's well worth a read if you haven't already, and it delves a little bit more into the context and possibly some of the expectations the community council has around the outcomes for some of these sites. So I'd definitely recommend having a look at those. As Peter alluded to as well, my title is Development Director Gungahlin, so I've got a strong focus in positive outcomes for all things Gungahlin. We'll try to answer any questions possibly at the end of the presentation. Might be the most efficient way to do it. I'm not opposed if things come up as we go through the context, but it might be easier to punch through quite quickly. We've also got some good content on the community garden and Gold Creek at the end, so I do want to try to punch through quite efficiently if we can. Sorry, just having an issue with moving the slides. Just 1 second. There we go. Just a quick overview there of the Suburban Land Agency for people not familiar with what we do. So we're the agency that designs, develops and sells land on behalf of government. Again, our strong focus is creating great places where communities thrive. We also have a strong focus on sustainability, affordability and housing choice. So I'll move on, next one. This is a bit of the summary of the indicative land release program. As we talked on before, ordinary practice is for a 4-year land release program to come out, but it was a bit of an unusual year with COVID and a delayed budget period. So we've only got a 1-year program. So we've tried to constrain our presentation to this 1-year program. This is the table constraint to just Gungahlin. So we've removed most of the other things, feeling the Community Council will have more of a focus on Gungahlin. A little bit of the overview there. Again, on the summary that the Gungahlin Community Council put up, they've also done a little bit of a track changes from the previous indicative land release program to this one. If I was to look at those elements, there's sort of 2 elements that have moved around since the last program, and that's Jacka 2, which has pushed back a little bit in terms of its initial release, and Kenny, which has had 100 come into this indicative land release program. So we'll talk very quickly to a few of those ones. Again, our presentation is just focused on this initial 12 months. I know there'll be some interest in beyond that, but we've tried to just keep it with what is the adopted land release program at this point. And again, probably a good one to touch on there is at the bottom there, it shows a bit of the breakdown on what's in the existing urban areas, what's greenfield. For those a little bit familiar with the parliamentary agreement that's just come out, it talks to a 30-70, so 70% of new development in the urban footprint and 30 in the greenfield. You'll find Gungahlin is a little bit ahead of that in terms of 55-60, 40-60. But that shouldn't come as a surprise with Gungahlin having greenfield suburbs of Taylor and Throsby, which are new releases. So a little bit weighted outside of the norm, but that again offsets the city and some of our other urban areas. Just to talk quickly on a couple of the ones that we don't have more detailed slides on as we go further through. So Casey is on there. We haven't got a slide on Casey yet, so to talk it through a little bit, there's a quite well-established pipeline for development of the projects where we look at due diligence and planning happening with our EPSDD colleagues, and then it gets handed across in a assurance package to SLA. We're still at the due diligence and planning stage on that one. I know there's a lot of interest from the Community Council and stakeholders in Casey, so there will be engagement coming up in Casey with what I understand after Christmas, so definitely keep an eye out for that.
And just to be clear, that's the blocks opposite the existing Casey Group Centre that are destined for community use.
Yeah, so that's the handback sites, and I guess to look at the table right now, they're in the indicative land release as commercial, but it's worth stressing that that engagement process still needs to happen, and Gungahlin Community Council has been identified as an interested stakeholder, but also the more broad community, you'll get your chance to participate in those engagement events, and that'll sort of shape the future release that's coming out there. The other one which we don't have a more detailed slide on further through this presentation is Jacka. So just a quick summary on Jacka is the first stage of the development application is being assessed by the Planning and Land Agency. We're excited about a few of the proposed elements in there, from all electric suburb to batteries, but we'll keep people abreast of when there's an outcome on that DA. That's when we can probably be in a position to have a more detailed session specifically for Jacka. So jumping into the town centre, always an exciting element. It makes up quite a large component of the dwellings, usually more multi-unit than single. We've got 3 blocks on the program for this year. They're all mixed use, which is allows a range of uses. Even though we have sort of identified here that these ones would allow an expansion of commercial or retail, it is starting to get to the fringe of the town centre. So whether a developer chooses to take that on, we are still assessing whether it has a mandatory commercial component or not in terms of our release strategy. But if it doesn't have a mandatory, it will have adaptive use as the town centre moves forward. Collectively, we're looking at about 400 odd dwellings for these 3 blocks. We do 80 affordable and public housing, so there's a good mix of following through on commitment to affordable. In this year, we also have a carryover block from last year that was terminated that will also go back out to market. I won't touch on it too much here because we do have a slide down there, but these blocks are starting to also be adjacent to the future linear park. There's a lot of interest in that one, but we do have a slide, so I won't loiter on that slide for too much longer. Another exciting one is the Moncrief Group Centre that's due to come out this year. It is tagged a little bit for a full line supermarket amongst other retail outlets. There's also an adjacent site that's got the mixed use or 100 dwellings. Again, we're still doing the due diligence on this one in terms of what the release will look like, and we do have stakeholder engagement activities coming up. It's worth stressing with Moncrief, we're wanting to look, which is the group centre, it's worth stressing that we want to look at the Taylor local centre as well. It's in very close proximity to this development, so we're very keen to try to do the engagement on both those sites together to make sure that we get overall quite a good outcome for both sites. Again, people who are interested in having their say towards what type of shops and outcome they'd like to see on the Moncrief Group Centre, there will be engagement happening on these after Christmas. So stay tuned. We'll definitely make sure that that's well publicised and try to engage as broadly as possible. So that transitions well into the Taylor local centre. We've learnt some good lessons from our local centres, and given this has a smaller catchment and is very, very close to the Moncrief Group Centre, we're looking to do our engagement and development together. This one's designed to service the internal local community of Taylor. It's worth noting it's also adjacent to the direct sale, which is a future religious facility and community centre, so it's well located, and we'll explore how those 2 developments can work well together to get a good outcome. As we'd noted too there's also capacity for a developer to take on residential to that. That's to improve the viability and the attractiveness of that site. So it has the mandatory commercial, which ensures that we get the shop outcome, but there is also capacity to have up to 3 stories there, which can have a residential component. Again, as we said with Moncrief, there's upcoming stakeholder engagement, so definitely encourage any local residents who have an interest in what type of shops or convenience retail or other elements they might like to see in the future suburb, definitely come along to those engagements and have your say. So Taylor more generally is our large component of our what we call our greenfield area. It's got most of the single residential. In fact, we've got over 500 single residential coming out this financial year. We've been quite happy with the exchange rate today this financial year. We've had about 200 blocks exchange year to date, so that's about potentially 500 new residents will be welcoming to the suburb shortly. There's a number of releases planned over the forward program, and there's a really great selection of block sizes, price points, outlooks. There's really something for everyone in Taylor. But if you are in a hurry, there's no need to wait till those release dates, because we do have about 90 blocks over the counter ready to go right now. So anyone who is interested in looking at Taylor, definitely get in touch. We'll try to connect you with the best block for you. Again, talking there, the local centre is due to come out, the Moncrief Group Centre is due to come out, and we've also got the direct sale that's adjacent there, which is for that community facility and religious facility. So jumping into Throsby, we had a quite remarkable response to the last release in Throsby. So we've got the final 82 blocks already out in September. They all went really, really, really quickly, which was quite encouraging to us to show that Gungahlin's quite a attractive place for people to be looking to live and whatnot. So possibly a few residents a little bit disappointed to miss out there, but it was really quite overwhelming demand for those last couple of blocks. The residents of Throsby shouldn't be expecting us to disappear anytime soon, though. We've still got the Mingle program for community development in place, and that'll still be active for quite a while into the future. Also, some other exciting elements happening in Throsby are the school's looking to kick off, and it's on track. You'll see quite a lot of civil equipment working around and earth moving all over the place. And Throsby is also geared as the future home of football. Jumping into Kenny. So Kenny's the one that jumped into the program that wasn't in there previously. There's a technical amendment or variation going to come up quite soon to turn quite a large portion of the old suburb into a future nature reserve. So that changes quite substantially what Kenny was anticipated to look like. You can sort of see in that slide there, we've tried to shade it out in green of what the major change there is. We're starting to look at the visioning of this suburb and moving towards state development plans and other things. Stakeholder engagement will form a very important part in informing that. So anyone who is interested in having a say on that will be looking to go out on our engagement over the next year to two. Moving through. So into a few upcoming engagements that might be of interest. As we alluded to previously, we've got the town centre linear park. Those couple of blocks that we've got shaded in red across there between Anthony Ralph and Camilleri Way, that's the identified footprint for the linear park over the 4 blocks. There'll be quite a few opportunities for stakeholder engagement coming up through that design process and into delivery. And again, there's a master plan in place, but we'll be looking to adjust that to come in line with climate change initiatives and whatnot from current policy. So that's having a really close look at tree selection, where we can use permeable pavers, shadowing, tree canopy, and all sorts of elements like that. Those engagement processes will be looking to start after Christmas, and we'll be again promoting those quite widely to try to get a really good amount of the community where we can. So we do have quite a few other people from the SLA on the call at the moment, from our community development team to our comms. And from what I understood, we were going to have our community development team start to talk to the Throsby Community Garden.
Yes, thanks, Andrew. I'm Simone, and I am with the Mingle team, which is the SLA team that will certainly be working in Throsby for a few years to come. And one of the engagements that we have been doing this year is supporting the Woodlands and Wetlands Trust to do community consultation around a proposed community garden that would be adjacent to their learning centre that's currently under construction in Throsby. We've had a really high level of interest from the community. We did a survey on Your Say that was open from June until the end of July. And we also had quite a lot of feedback through a number of different channels. So we've been collating that feedback. We're really pleased to see that a lot of people are really interested in learning from each other and learning to grow food and having connection to nature and all of those benefits that community gardens can offer. We've also had some people express some concerns about the project, about the location, and various other aspects. So we've been working hard to sort of collate all that feedback and to do some investigations just to make sure that we understand all of the issues there and the kind of options that the community and the Woodlands and Wetlands Trust might want to take to mitigate some of those issues, to work around them, assuming that there is enough ongoing community support for the project to go ahead. There is a report on the Your Say website, and there's a link to that in the bottom of that slide. But if you just search for Throsby Community Garden Your Say, that will come up for you. So anybody who's interested in knowing in more detail what sort of feedback we have received, I really encourage you to go and have a look at that report. We will be doing a community consultation workshop early next year. And that's where we really hope that we can find the common ground between all of the people that have an interest in the community garden. So if you're interested in being part of that workshop, really encourage you to get in touch. Just email us with Mingle at theact.gov.au, but you could just call the Suburban Land Agency. You can message us through our Facebook page. Just get in touch if you would like to know more about this issue, about this proposal. And once again, I really encourage you to have a look at that listening report that's up on your site. And I think we can move on, Andrew.
Sure.
Okay, hi guys. I'm Nat Bishop. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, give you an update really on the Ngunnawal Gold Creek Homestead sales process and where we're up to. So the request for tender closed on the 15th of October, and this was extended from the 10th of September because we needed some time to comprehensively respond to questions from some of the proponents. The evaluation process is underway, and we're hoping to have a preferred tenderer selected and be in the position to provide further updates early in the new year. Once the preferred tenderer is identified, we will enter into the negotiation phase, which includes the negotiation of the contract for sale and concept delivery deed. And the CDD, the concept delivery deed, is the requirements, the rights and obligations in respect of the development of the land. So that includes the minimum requirements as set out in the development obligations, green star requirements, easements, cross-block links, etc. Following the successful negotiations, we will hopefully be in a position to exchange contracts at earliest in April 2021. And following that, further engagement and design development will take place with settlement anticipated at the earliest in April 2022, subject to DA approval. We'd also just like to let you know that the Suburban Land Agency Communication Link and Place Lab were recognised for the place-led engagement for Ngunnawal Gold Creek Homestead through a commendation at the 2020 PIA, which stands for Planning Institute of Australia, ACT Awards for Planning Excellence recently for public engagement and community planning. And I'd really just like to highlight here, obviously we're honoured to receive that recognition, but it's really testament to the dedication, passion and care of the Ngunnawal Gold Creek Community Stakeholder Panel, who really developed that precinct development brief. So if anyone's interested, there is a little video, and I'm sure Peter can share that link. It's on the 2020 PIA ACT website, and it includes an acceptance speech from our CEO, John Dietz, in relation to that. And the announcement starts at, I think, 30 minutes and 15 seconds. That's me.
So that was also it from Suburban Land today. We're certainly happy to take any comments, questions, queries that the Community Council may have. Let's see how I go with sharing.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate you've gone through quite a lot, and I guess it's a really useful takeaway that even though we are nearing the end of Gungahlin development, there's still an enormous amount going on. I was actually out driving around some suburbs looking at what's just happening in Taylor, and it is quite overwhelming, the scale of construction and stuff that's still going on. Anyone in the looking for a question? Got a chat item? I know I've had a chance to answer most of my questions earlier. I'm particularly interested in the linear park, but I see Henley, you had a question?
Yeah, I just want to, appreciate the presentation and stuff. Just want to make sure that, with the new suburb, when they design, they don't design the linking of the roads and stuff with the existing roads. If that, for example, in the Moncrief area and Taylor, once those Dawsbog Drive was completed, now we broke the brand new road, and then we're trying to connect to Taylor and Moncrief and so on. So I assume that the Jaka, when the Jaka Part B gonna comes, there's gonna same thing gonna happen. So I just want to, for your team to be mindful of working with those existing roads and make sure, they leave those path constraints. We're going to have Kenny and stuff. So these are the basic things. If they can do, that'll be good. So that's just my command for you guys to take it on board.
So it's definitely an excellent comment, and it's always a bit frustrating from people's perspectives when you've got brand new asphalt that gets cuts or lines in it. When we do tie-ins to existing road networks, there is a bit of a handover process back to DCCS. So we always do get our work up to a standard that needs to be handed over to the eventual custodian, but definitely those points are noted.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks, Henley. Thanks, Andrew. And Darren has a question from Facebook for the SLA team.
So I've got a question here. Many Throsby residents raised concerns about local shops in Throsby prior to the election. Any opportunities for getting on there?
Look, unfortunately, the short answer is no. If we went back to the start of the suburb, it was always intended to be a little bit bigger. If we went back to the structure plan, when some environmental constraints were identified, it was scaled back a little bit, and there was a commercial needs study done. That commercial needs study basically resulted in removing a mandatory commercial centre back to a mixed-use site. The mixed-use site was then sold, and the development outcome wasn't shops. So with all the blocks sold, the reality is there's not really capacity for a local shops or a commercial to go in there now. What would probably push from the SLA is that it's probably about 5 minutes into the Harrison local shops. We're pretty quick into the town centre. So definitely do take note of the disappointment from a lot of residents of not getting shops. But Throsby is also really attractively located in terms of convenience and retail that is within that sort of 5 to 10 minute drive in quite a few different locations.
Yeah, look, I think there's, sort of aware of the Gungahlin strategic assessment that led to the scale down, but I think it just highlights that example where we put out a block that was mixed use, and it could have gone either way. I think it's one of the disconnects that people have between how the land's zoned and what the expectation is around what might go there. The classic examples are, open land that suddenly, there's a development on where people expected it to stay as a park forever, but of course it wasn't. Or in this case, it was a site that could have had some shops in it, but didn't, because whoever acquired it decided that within the conditions of the lease, they didn't have to do that. And I guess that just means we all have to communicate better about how the zoning can play out, as opposed to how people might want it to play out, given that there's this tricky interaction between trying to drive outcomes versus what the commercial market's prepared to invest in and do. So I don't know if there's any easy way out of that, but sometimes, when sites are sold to certain developers, it's kind of obvious that, how that's going to go, but I guess it's in the hand of a commercial tender. So
look, it's very useful feedback, and we have taken that on board, and we've read all the comments that have come back in there. It does drive our forward direction. So as we talked on previously on Taylor, that Taylor's got that multi-unit component above it to try to get that good outcome of attractiveness. I suppose one of the challenges that could have happened in Throsby, if you did get the local shops, is with the smaller catchment, they might not have been viable. And one of the worst outcomes that can come is we get the development, but nobody goes in there, or a business can't make a living. So there's always that balancing point. But 100% we have listened to the feedback that's come from the Throsby community and the broader community, and that'll drive future development direction with our upcoming suburbs.
Yeah, and then the other complication is that sometimes real estate agents will produce maps saying a future shop site or future something else, which certainly was the case in some parts of Throsby. Darren has another question for us from Facebook.
This one relates to NBN connections. Is there any way to ensure that developers of apartment blocks install NBN to all the apartments in their blocks? I think they quoted Infinity Apartments, developed by Geocon, only have about 1/3 of the apartments serviced by NBN.
I'm not sure. I don't know, Andrew. Is that what you want to catch?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I do apologise off the top of my head. I can't say whether we mandate in that area, but to a certain extent, SLA can always mandate into certain areas. We tend to not do that, because there's usually a bit more overarching planning controls that do push what developers need to do. And I guess from a future focus perspective, a smart developer is going to look at what the market wants, and if they're expecting future residents to want NBN, they'd be a little bit silly not to put it in. But I'd probably need to take that one on notice and possibly follow up with a better answer.
Yeah, if you could. I mean that in this day and age, that seems a bit like a bit of an anathema to me. But anyway, the whole NBN multi-dwelling unit discussion is pretty complex. I'm just sort of conscious we're well over time for the evening, and we have one more speaker to go. Yeah, some other commentary here. You can probably see, Andrew, around some of the communication around what was going to happen in Throsby and what's actually happened. You know, perhaps worth a bit of a review and maybe a bit of a deep dive. So maybe we could take that on notice as well.
We'll do a bit of an export of the chat and make sure that we have a look at all of those comments internally.
Great, thanks, Andrew. All right, well, in the absence of any more specific questions and the pressure of time, thank you, Andrew, and Natalie and Simone and the team for a pretty comprehensive update. Covered a lot of ground. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'd also like to take a moment, having participated in the Gold Creek panel, along with a former GCC member, Manuel Huck, and a bunch of residents. It was a really, really excellent process. It's something I'd really like to see more of. Maybe not for every DA and every block, but for anything that's substantive of the scale of a major project in the town centre, or Kenny or Jacker. I think that process of getting 20 people in to spend some quality time together really was a good way of capturing the mood of the community. With that, the other thing I need to mention is that we do have two of our newly minted members of the Legislative Assembly joining the meeting tonight. I'd like to congratulate Andrew Braddock and Leanne Castley on the success in the ACT election. But also to welcome to the meeting. We greatly value your participation and chance to, and you taking the opportunity to listen to some of the issues that are coming up. So thank you for joining us. If you're on the Zoom, you could grab them for a chat, I suspect, as well. All right, well, we're on to our third speaker for the night. The team from Pod Projects. I think Terry's running the show, but I suspect we'll see how that plays out. This is they're talking about their thinking around one of the sites sold earlier in the year in the town centre. This is one of the edge sites that sort of bounds the residential areas that are already developed. So without further ado, over to you, Terry, and the Pod Projects team. Good, Paul. Good day, Paul.
Thank you very much. Paul O'Donnell's my name from Pod Projects. I'd probably like to start by acknowledging that today is Remembrance Day, and thanking all those people who sacrificed so much to allow us to have the opportunities that we do moving forward. So thank you. I'm an extremely proud Gungahlin resident. I've been involved in the property industry since 1993, selling land in Palmerston. I bought my first home in Ngunnawal in 1995, but I've been settled for the last 20 years in Emeroo and set my business up in Gungahlin, the Yerribi Ponds. Most of my family, 9 brothers and sisters, 12 grandchildren and my mother all live, work, and involved in Gungahlin. We're extremely proud. The area we live in, we think it's the best part of Canberra. We're biased from our developing and have generally tried to purchase our sites, and I guess it shines through. All our staff live here and we love the place. We probably acknowledge, we agree with the Gungahlin Community Council's position that more sites in the town centre should be set aside for office space, and we'll identify a few that I'm probably sure you're lobbying government already at this point of time for, but in case not. The site that we've purchased, we're very excited about it. It's the largest purchase my company has done. It's a 12,000 metre block. We're looking to subdivide into 3 sites and develop it over the next 8 to 10 years. The lease development conditions on that do not allow us to put large office space. It barely allows even a large commercial. Nothing above 200 metres is allowed, and it's all limited to the ground floor. So it's effectively a residential site. We're still very excited about the opportunity there, and we've got some great ideas that the team here will present this evening to you. One thing we do note that not only my business, I'll have construction of the Jade development finishing later this year. It'll be the first time in 15 years that my company has no construction at a time. And we're noting that a lot of the construction in the Gungahlin town centre, the major tower construction that's been on for the last 5 years is coming to an end. A bit concerned of how that'll impact a lot of the commercial traders, and we'd be very keen to, subject to a full DA process, getting approval and starting stage 1 of this site as soon as possible. We're moving towards a commitment to do a build to rent. I'm not sure whether it's the Greens and the Labor that copied us or we copied them, but I think we've both been working on a similar idea at the same time. So I think it's needed, and it will help our company have a little bit of way of helping the post-COVID economy, and creating jobs as quick as we possibly can by doing the first stage, one that doesn't require pre-sales. My company's got a great record in sustainability. We're one of the first major developers to move to double glazing compulsory, removing natural gas from our developments, including our rooftop gardens. We've got a lot more exciting things that the team will talk about tonight. I'd just like to thank you and just pass on to Terry to take over from here. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. So the site we're looking at is Block 3, Section 229 in the town centre. It did have its name changed. It went to market as Block 2, Section 229, but it's now Block 3, so that just to avoid any confusion there. It's bordered by Anthony Rolfe Avenue to the north, Kate Crace Street, Ernest Kavanagh and Hinder Street. As Paul said, it's around 12,000 square metres, so it's a fairly large site. It's across the road from the Uptown Apartments, which is a 8-storey development with a commercial on the ground floor, and I think a childcare centre as well. And this site is only 200 metres to the Gungahlin Place light rail stop, so it's in an excellent location. Moving on. So the key lease development conditions, as Paul mentioned, there is a high value tree on the northwest corner of the site, eucalypt, which I think a yellow box, which we're going to retain. The lease does have limitations with regards to commercial. Non-retail commercial shop and restaurant uses are limited to the ground floor, and there's a maximum of 200 square metres per tenancy. So as Paul mentioned, large scale office is not a possibility on this particular site. There's also an existing surface car park that's available to the public currently on this site. That services around about 180, I think it's about 180 car spaces. And that will be moved to Block 2, Section 11, which is immediately next door. And it's part of the development deed that the developers of that site construct a 180 car space public car park. The other key requirement of this site is to build 25 affordable rental dwellings. So the key planning control, I guess, is the building envelope. This envelope has been in place for this particular site since the 2012 Gungahlin Precinct Code. So it's a well-established envelope that hasn't changed over the last 8 years. It has an 18-metre limit around the boundary of the site, and then a 30-degree sort of taper increasing towards the middle of the site that sort of allows the building heights to increase as you move into the middle of the block. So our particular proposal for this site, and Marcus will talk in more detail about this from Stewart Architecture, we are looking at around about 550 to 600 units. The site is actually capable of significantly more, but we do have a fairly exciting design response where we've got some good permeability through the buildings on this site and opportunities for deep root planting and pedestrian permeability. There'll probably be around 700 to 750 car spaces in a basement as well. Just to add our bit to the conversation around offices in the office accommodation in the town centre, I guess we share the Community Council's view that town centres work best when you have a mix of people living there, working there, and being able to play there. And when you work there, it shouldn't just be retail and service industries. It should be a mix of those sort of employment opportunities as well, and office plays a key part. We acknowledge there's already a government office building there and another one under construction, but this particular slide we thought was relevant. It's from the current estate development plan for Gungahlin Town Centre East, which was done back in 2016, and those 6 sites that you see there, they straddle the light rail. They're all noted in the EDP as office. So that might be something that the GCC may continue to advocate for, I guess, in terms of the land release program. None of those sites are sold or on the land release program, I don't believe. So back to our site. Pod Project set some very ambitious objectives for the project team. The key one being to create a genuine world-class precinct that sets a new benchmark for the town centre in terms of apartment development and adopting best practice build standards as well. But also to respond in a meaningful and practical and significant way to climate change and evolve the work that Pod have already done in this space on their previous projects. And then the third part is to ensure social cohesion through public spaces, rooftop landscaping and activated green spaces. So the design intent is to have building heights that remain consistent with the building envelope and consistent with the territory plan, provide a strong urban edge to the town centre, noting the site's location, varied building typologies and facade elements. This is a large site and we don't want a sort of a homogeneous built form across such a big site. We also want to ensure that there is deep root planting provided through the site, landscape the rooftops and provide communal spaces there, and then encourage some placemaking on the ground plane. As Paul mentioned in his opening remarks, there will be a reduction in construction activity in the Gungahlin Town Centre for the first time in quite a while, and that's sort of occurring now and into early next year. And construction activity does make a significant contribution to the town centre economy. And I guess as part of Pod's COVID economic response contribution is the commitment to build the first stage immediately upon DA approval. That we estimate that'll create around 500 jobs and inject around 200 million into the economy. This will be a build to rent project. It'll add rental stock at the affordable end of the market, which continues to experience low vacancy rates. And I might, I'll hand over now to Marcus to take us through some of the architecture and design response.
Great, thanks Terry. Yeah, Marcus Graham from Stewart Architecture. And we've been working on our proposals since April of this year. And in that time, we've made 2 presentations to the National Capital Design Review Panel in August and October. And just to clarify the panel, the Design Review Panel, or DRP, it's a group of eminent national architects, landscape architects and urban planners who review the design and provide recommendations for consideration by the design team. So in the plans you see tonight, there's already been a significant evolution of the design based on the advice of that DRP, the Design Review Panel, and that includes increase of deep root planting, improvements to the building address and interface with the surrounding streets, improvements to the amenity and character of all of the landscape spaces, and changes to the dwelling layout to improve solar access and natural ventilation. Now, our proposal includes 4 buildings, each with up to 150 apartments. And importantly, the total footprint of these buildings is about 6,400 square metres, which is 55% of the site. So 45% of the site is retained as ground level landscape space. Now, the buildings are all built to the street boundaries, and that's as promoted and required by the Gungahlin Precinct Code to achieve a strong urban form and streetscape within the town centre. You can see here the buildings, north is up the page, so the buildings are all orientated north-south to create wide landscape interfaces which receive northern sun, so excellent sun throughout the day in all of those landscape spaces. And each of the landscape spaces have varying character. The ones on the east and west provide shared zones for pedestrian and vehicular movement through the site, linking the surrounding streets. And the central spaces are mainly a quieter pedestrian landscape, but all of them link to the wider Gungahlin pedestrian, cyclist and parkland network, which is in the town centre and then extends out of the town centre. The grey colours on this drawing indicate the rise in height. So around the perimeter, the light grey is 6 stories, and then moving, terracing up to the centre of the site, the darkest grey is 12 stories. Next slide, please. The streetscape, this is the streetscape from Anthony Rolfe Avenue, and it shows the 4 buildings with the wide landscape spaces between, and they vary from 18 to 22 metres, which is about the width of a standard suburban street. To the right is the uptown development, and that's a similar scale and density to what we're proposing through this site. And the 6-storey height of the street is clearly articulated by a strong parapet line, and then the buildings rise up to 12 stories towards the centre of the site. The ground plane is designed to be an active and vibrant space with address points being lobbies, lounges and courtyards to all the surrounding streets and laneways. And priority is placed on pedestrian movement to and within the site. And the Design Review Panel has actually encouraged us to incorporate some small commercial tenancies which we're currently developing into this scheme. And all of the building services such as waste storage are carefully integrated into the building footprints. Next. This diagram shows the intent to provide an extensive deep root planting across the site. So the basements are all designed within the general footprints of the buildings, and that all of the green shown here, plus the remnant tree in the northwest, provide about 16% of the site for deep root planting, and that allows proper canopy tree growth. And that allows good privacy between each of the buildings and shades the ground plane to reduce heat build-up within the town centre. Solar access, by running the buildings north-south, it ensures that every dwelling achieves at least morning or afternoon sun, if not north-facing dwellings. There is not a single south-facing dwelling in the proposal. And then most of the dwellings have their living rooms pushed to that outer facade, which maximises solar access into the living space of the dwelling. And that promotes natural heat gain in winter and minimises the use of heaters. Additionally, every single corridor has views to the outside and daylighting. Thanks. Ventilation, it's a highly articulated building form. We've carved deep recesses into each building, into each facade, and that's allowed almost 60% of apartments to be a corner design. So 2 facades to promoting natural ventilation, and that minimises use of any air conditioning in the scheme. And then roof gardens, because we're terracing the buildings to address the building envelope, we've got 1,600 square metres of active roof gardens. That's either private or communal outdoor space on the roofs. And again, this significantly increases landscape area across the site and provides additional soft landscape that further reduces heat gain within the town centre. And at the roof levels, we're also looking to incorporate some larger family apartments where there can be safe access onto those larger rooftop terraces. And now we look at some of the architectural imagery, and this is all developing. But as Terry mentioned, we've got 4 buildings and each have a distinct individual architectural design, and that's to avoid monotony across this quite large precinct. And common themes are recessed balconies. This is building A at the west of the site, so recessed balconies, and that ensures all the balconies are usable and comfortable throughout the year. And there's opportunity to have external blinds and even winter garden glazing. We want buildings that avoid full glaze facades, so there's an appropriate balance of window to wall. And building A, you can see here, it wraps that remnant eucalypt at the northwest corner of the site, and the double height facade elements and courtyards addressing Hinders Street. This is building C. Here we're experimenting with a more modern architecture with a very strong horizontal form, and that includes glazed winter gardens. And in this building, you can see, for example, the rooftop gardens or the terraces at each end, the north and south ends of the roof, which are visible in that image. And finally, these are images of those landscape and shared zone spaces through the site. And the bottom 2 are illustrations of building B1 and B2, which show, here we're trying or looking at a more eclectic architectural form because these buildings bound that central garden. And on these buildings, we're looking at possible brickwork facades to provide some additional texture and character to this important landscape space. So in summary, with each building, we're experimenting with a variety of techniques to achieve a vibrancy of architectural language across the precinct. And we want to ensure that it's an extremely high quality architectural and urban design outcome for Gungahlin Town Centre. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I'll just jump onto traffic and then go through some of the sustainability initiatives. The traffic study is underway. The preliminary analysis and feedback from the consultants is that the traffic generated by the proposed development will actually be lower than what was contemplated in the estate development plan. And I think the good thing about the Gungahlin Town Centre is with the work that the ACT government has done, and this should be acknowledged, around that sort of master planning of the town centre, they've already contemplated the scale of development that is proposed for these sites. So we're not trying to retrofit buildings into a street network or a road layout that perhaps wasn't originally designed for that. So it's really no surprise, I guess, that with the lower yield on this particular site compared to what was possible, that the traffic generated by this site is lower, and at least that's what the early analysis is showing us, than what the EDP originally contemplated. So just touching on some of the sustainability initiatives. So and building on, I think it's important to note the work that Pod Project have already done in this space. So they've already eliminated natural gas from their projects. They mandate double glazing throughout their buildings. They introduced rooftop gardens probably 3 or 4 developments ago, and have also mandated high energy efficiency rating for their apartments. So that's already beyond the legislative requirements in the ACT, and some of these initiatives actually go beyond the legislative ambitions of this next assembly. For this particular site, there's some exciting things that we're looking at. We are on those sections of the rooftop which won't be used for community spaces and rooftop gardens. We are looking at installing solar panels to power the common areas. and the benefit of that, apart from adding to the green energy footprint of the territory and the town centre, is to actually reduce the cost of the body corporate levies for the residents. Probably what's really exciting is a initiative that's been explored as well for an off-site community solar farm. And the early advice we're getting to power all of the apartments from this community solar farm with renewable energies, that would need to be around a 4 megawatt size project. And the benefit of providing these community solar farms is typically they can deliver electricity to residents at a discount to the major retailers, and that can be in the order of 10 to 20%. It's not a given. We're at the early stages of engaging with the consultants and looking at the feasibility. It's a very highly regulated space that is in a state of flux. It keeps changing. So there's a lot of work to do to deliver that, but it's one that pod projects are committed to try and do as a Canberra first. In addition, I guess the other evolution that's occurred is I think the jury's out now on whether the next generation of vehicles are going to be electric or hydrogen. All the major car manufacturers have now moved to electric, and it's now given us the confidence to look at future-proofing the basements for electric vehicles and for electric bike charging. So what we'll be doing here is future-proofing the development, so people that move in, if they already have an electric car or they buy an electric car over the next 5 or 10 years or whatever, they will be able to charge that from their basement car space. And again, that's a fast-moving space in terms of the technology and infrastructure that's required. So we're still looking into the details of how that works, but that is a commitment that we are going to implement. And as Mark has touched on, and Peter mentioned earlier in the meeting as well, urban heat island effect is an issue in the Gungahlin Town Centre, and that CSIRO study that was done for all of the ACT highlights that. And so we have spent some time looking at how we can reduce the impact of that on this particular site. And the key to that is the deep root planting, which facilitates large trees. And when you have a lot of large trees, the evapotranspiration that occurs from that can actually have a meaningful effect to the microclimate. And then you combine that with the rooftop gardens, and then you look at selection of materials that are not heat sinks, so high albedo materials. So we don't want lots of black asphalt that soak up all the daytime heat and then release it overnight and keep those public spaces warm. We're going to avoid those sort of materials as well. And we think the combination of all of those initiatives will be to have a demonstrable impact on the microclimate and the urban heat island in this development. What we've also found as well when we're sort of working through this is there's actually a synergy between cost of living and sustainability. So when you build high performing apartments, when you provide the solar power to the common areas, when you look at the whole of life cycle cost of building materials to reduce the maintenance over the life of the building, all of those things contribute to lower body corporate costs and lower heating and cooling costs for residents. So effectively making a contribution to reduce cost of living and at the same time deliver on sustainability. So we're quite excited, I guess, about all of the benefits that these investments will bring to this development. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
That's it, Peter, and there's a game of footy starting soon, I think, as well.
In a bygone time, the Gungahlin Community Council would not schedule a meeting on a state of origin, but I think some of the more passionate rugby league supporters have gone on to bigger and greater things from the GCC. So perhaps that. All right. Well, look, I'm fortunate enough to have had a walk around on site with Terry and looked at all the effort that's going into this development. look, your commentary around the greater Gungahlin town centre is a tricky one, and I think you heard the earlier comments around how do we kind of align residents' expectations to planning rules and precinct codes and estate development plans and the commercial reality of where investors can build, given all of the other things that are going on. So I'm trying to cast around for some questions. Darren, if you've got anything on Facebook, you'll let me know. I guess I'm interested in your comments around the government's good planning around the road infrastructure, because I think you're possibly the only residents on Gungahlin who think traffic flows well around the town centre at the moment. And I think it's complicated. There's obviously developments underway and things aren't quite done. And I think it's been impacted by some of the design and implementation decisions of individual developers in some of the commercial shopping centres, retail shopping centres, very poor entrances into underground car parks, resulting in queues coming back onto the roads and then into traffic lights and so on. So I'm really interested, obviously this particular development you're indicating it's got a low impact on traffic. But how do you see, you've said it's going well, but I guess I'm countering that and saying, I'm not sure it is going well. So, I mean, how do you help the government steer their way through all that, both dealing with issues of traffic and parking right now versus planning for whatever the future is going to be?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess the benchmark that the traffic consultants have looked at, and it's still early days, as I said, on their traffic work, was to look at the traffic generated from this particular site in the estate development plan, and then compare that to the traffic that's being generated from what we're proposing to do on the site. So it wasn't really a Gungahlin wide view. It was, I guess, a fairly concentrated view on the particular site. And when we do that comparison, we see that there is less traffic generated from this site than what was shown in the original estate development plan.
Right. Okay, so the state development plan, that's DA 2017-31061, something like that. I don't have a copy of it. I have to dig it up, so go look for it. But yes, stacks of stuff to look at. Darren, you've got a question.
I just swapped over my microphone, so hopefully you can hear me. So one of the concerns that I have is that with your development, it doesn't seem to be a lot of retail spaces. I know that you did suggest, and I appreciate the fact that you did acknowledge the fact of going forward that Gungahlin would be better if we had lots more business spaces and things like that. But your development looks like the type of place that I would want to walk to from the CBD and sort of have a coffee or visit some retail shops. And I think if you had more of them there, a bit like how your offices are in Yarrabee Ponds, where you're located. There's a lot of shops there, and I walk past there pretty much every day, and I've seen you guys there as well. That area is quite vibrant and quite open to the rest of the community, as well as the people who are living in those apartments. So I would hope that in the future, looking at this project, that you would consider putting more shops just down the bottom there, and I think that would integrate really well with the CBD.
Darren, Marcus here. Thanks for that comment, and it's a very good one, and certainly that was raised by the design review panel as well, and not in the drawings we've shown you tonight, but we're actually currently incorporating some retail into the northern frontage of the middle two buildings addressing Anthony Rolfe Avenue, and the reason we've located it there, it's about 500 square metres of retail internal, and then it will spill out into that central landscape zone and north onto Anthony Rolfe Drive. So perfect for a coffee shop, for you to get your coffee. So it's spot on, and it will be included in the scheme.
It also mirrors on the other side of Anthony Rolfe. You also do have those ground floor commercial businesses that are sort of underneath the residential there as well. So it sort of does talk to those smaller commercial tenancies on that side of Anthony Rolfe as well.
And we picked that location because it'll be in morning, midday, afternoon sun throughout the day. So it's giving it every guarantee of success there.
I appreciate the fact that when I look at your development, that it does appear that you haven't sort of used every square piece of space to put apartments, that you are actually giving some space in order for people to sort of interact with the trees and with the environment. So I definitely give you points for that. I think you've done a really good job there. It just would be good to get more sort of restaurants and things downstairs.
Yep.
That'd be perfect for this side.
It will be in there.
And they could all obviously be there to accommodate all the floods of cinema goers who may get to the cinemas anytime soon. Henley, you had a question.
Thanks, Peter. So at the moment, it looks like 8 to 10 years, the project. Is that right? So it's going to be 8 to 10 years. The scope of the project is, I'm not sure how much traffic it's going to create there. So that's the one issue I have. And every time the developer come and do a presentation, they always say they consulted the traffic model and it all works fine. But I couldn't see any evidence so far with all this development happening in the Gungahlin Centre. That's my point too. And the third one, you got the solar panel. Is it on the terrace or it's somewhere in the farm or it's part of the development? I'm not sure. If you can explain a bit more on that, that'd be good. And it seems to be a rent to build. Is that right? Yeah. So that means no one can buy. It's just for people to rent. And do you know what's the price you guys are planning? And is there any community housing has been allocated? Considering it's all going to be rent to, it's built to rent. So that means, is there any agreement with the government to allocate a space for the community housing? Thank you.
Yep, thanks. Well, there's a number of parts to that question, Henley. I'll attempt to answer them all. In relation to your last question first, there is no mandatory community housing requirement. The build to rent apartments have not been, we don't have any information as to what they would rent at. That'll be something that'll be determined closer to completion. In relation to the, it is only one of the 4 buildings on that site, so it's it's only a small part of the site. In relation to the solar panels, the solar panels that will generate electricity to contribute to the common area electricity, they'll be located on site on top of the rooftops of the buildings, of the 4 buildings. The solar power generated for the residents, for all of the apartments, they'll be off-site. So they'll be in a solar farm external to the site. Maybe in the ACT, maybe New South Wales. That's something that is yet to be determined, as is the feasibility of that actual initiative. And then you had another question which I've forgotten.
8 to 10 years.
The rent.
Yeah, it will be 8 to 10 years. The site is going to be subdivided into 3 blocks, and the first site will be the build to rent, yes. And then we'll run off from there.
Essentially 2 years of planning, handling, and then 1 building at a time, each one taking approximately 2 years, being mindful not to oversupply an area and just being consistent, just consistent with it. It's about the length of time it would take something of this size over 3 blocks.
Okay, and with the traffic model and the rent, what's the rent? Yeah.
Well, the rent will decide at the time of nearing completion. With the traffic model, there'll be a traffic study done, and that'll form part of the DA documentation. So there'll be a traffic report there done by the traffic engineers that you'll be able to read. I guess in your comment in relation to construction traffic, as opposed to some of those larger sort of tower sites that have been developed now, given that this site is a stage development and will be delivered over a number of years, there won't be the construction traffic, the same volume of construction traffic that you would have seen around some of those tower sites, because it'll be done on a stage basis. Yeah.
Last
Yeah,
week,
it'll
there we
be
go.
it'll be a bit tough than the last.
I just one pick up a thing I picked up when we had the site visit, Terry. Although there's no community housing, I understand you have a percentage or an amount of affordable units.
Yeah, there's a requirement for 25 affordable
Okay.
units.
Okay, consistent with the affordable housing
Strategy.
guidelines. Yeah. Okay. Online question from Darren. What percentage of visitor parking, and will the visitor parking have charging stations? So do you have any visitor parking? What percentage of your footprint will be that, and will they have charging?
So the visitor parking won't, as a general rule, have charging. There might be a spot where we provide a fast charging station, but that's subject to detail. In relation to the visitor parking, it's a mix of on-site, utilising the existing parking around the site on the street, and then utilising some of the parking spaces. But that's something that is being worked through as the design sort of comes to a conclusion. Then the traffic engineers will sort of get into that space and start working through those numbers as well.
Yep, and for the person who asked the question, I think there is a requirement on the big block between this site and Hibberson Street. That site's been sold. There's a requirement for that site to develop, I think, 180 public car spots.
Yep, that's correct.
Yes.
So that's got to be that's 180 car spaces that are available to the public 24/7, 365 days of the year.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll find a little bit more about that project as times move on as well. I think we're coming close to the end of the questions. There was one earlier one I saw go by, just confirming you're not intending to connect the gas network to any of the 4 buildings you're proposing.
Correct.
Right, okay. I think that was the only one I saw. Someone wants more higher end restaurants, don't we all? Traffic, yeah, just more questions about traffic, yeah. All right, I think we've exhausted the Gungahlin residents on a range of topics, not the least of which is drinking champagne. I mean, Hare Clark elections and all things development in all parts of Gungahlin. And look, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to share this with us. I think it's really positive that not only your team, Paul, but a couple of the other developers are coming out and putting some of their ideas long way ahead of the DA. So you get a chance for the community to avoid some surprises, and I think that's great. And I think the design review panel has been generally a good thing around town. My colleagues in the other community councils haven't seen a lot of it having impact, so it's good to know that you're finding it to be a positive experience, hopefully overall positive experience. So look, again, we thank you for your time this evening. And with that, I'll let the guys go from Pod. Thank you all for hanging on for a pretty dense evening. And again, thank you to the 2 MLAs who were able to join us tonight. Congratulations on the new spots, and thanks for joining with the community forum tonight. Thank you all. We'll see you in December. Don't forget, it's the first Wednesday of the month, the 2nd of December. Also our AGM, if you're interested in getting more formally involved with the Community Council, great chance to get onto the executive and be part of all of this. Thanks very much. Good night all.